Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to take a look at the new Activities feature, which gives us the opportunity to give players XP points in the game in Crayta. So this is kind of similar to the creator challenges, which gave us the opportunity to reward players for exploring the game and doing something a bit different in the game. Whereas the daily XP activities that we're looking at today, that's really about encouraging play of the game. So it's really embedded within the core game loop, such as in this tycoon game in front of me. Within the core game loop is things like collecting resources from the factory or selling those resources at the barge. So those might be some things that I want to encourage my players to do, and that's how to play the game. And so I would use the activities, XP activities for that. If it was something like get to the roof of the factory, which doesn't really marry up to the main objective of the game, but is fun nonetheless, that's the sort of thing that I would then use the creator challenge for. So hopefully that makes sense to distinguish between the activities and the challenges. So without further ado, let's look at how we can incorporate activities within our game. So I'm going to take a look at how we can reward our players with XP for collecting from this machine here. And this machine is assembling automatons, and I want to give them the opportunity to get some XP from collecting those automatons. So I'm going to need to use the advanced mode of the Crayta editor because that gives us the opportunity to use scripting, and it also opens up some of the options in the game tab here. I'm not sure why I'm swimming in the canal. That's fine. So here we go. In the game tab over here, we can see that we've got leaderboards, creator challenges, these things you might have already experienced or played around with, either as a player or as a creator. The new part that we're looking at today is this activities section here. Now, if you're not sure about anything I'm talking about or want a little bit more help, there's this really handy copy link to API documentation button here. So if you click on that and then navigate to a new tab, you can paste it in there and scroll down within here to find the Send XP events and really learn a little bit more about the activities. So that's a really handy thing to do. Yeah, so let's look at a method to incorporate these activities into the game. So to start with, I'm going to make an activity, like I said, where I get rewarded. I reward my players XP for collecting resources from the factory. So I'm going to start by adding the activity. So in the activities tab over here, I'm going to click this add element button. And then I'm going to fill out this little form here to make sure that the details of my activity are stored. So the ID is the unique identifier. And so it's the only activity in this game that will have this ID. And so that's going to be collect automaton. The display name I want to give it is collect an automaton. So that's the display name is going to be presented to the player, whereas the ID is kind of handled behind the scenes in the engine and stuff like that. Now, the categories drop down gives us the options to give our players a different amount of XP points, depending on how complex or how rare this activity might be. So, for example, if it's something that's going to happen all the time in the game, a regular occurrence, then you might want to give a low amount of XP points for that. Something like jumping or collecting resources. Whereas if it was something that was, you know, a major event that happened every few minutes, then you would probably give that a category of high. So that would reward them a lot of XP points because it would happen a lot less frequently. So general rule of thumb is the more frequent the activity is likely to occur in the game, the lower the category you want to give it. So collecting automatons is essentially probably the most frequent activity that the player is going to do in my game. So I'm going to give it the lowest category, low. The next box is for the event name. And this is really how we're going to talk to the API from our code. And so we'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to use the same term that I used for the ID. It doesn't have to be the same. And in fact, we might even be looking at how we can use the same event name, but using different conditions to save ourselves a little bit of work down the line. So the name I'm going to give it, or the event I'm going to give it, is the collect automaton event. Okay. So I've set up an event. I'm not going to worry about the conditional just yet. Now let's tie that into my game. So I need to somehow call this event so that it happens. And the way we do that is essentially in my game, within the templates, I have this Tycoon updatable. And this is the machine that is assembling my automatons. And this is where my player will interact with this particular thing. And then I need to somehow call the API to give them those delicious XP points. This is the template. And so within the root element of the template, the root entity of the template, there's this Tycoon updatable script. I can click on edit this asset. And then within here somewhere is the event that's called when the player interacts. So when the player interacts with this machine as it's doing its whirring, they will collect some automatons if there are any. And that event is this onInteract event here. So you can see that the script is already set up to do the collecting the automatons part. I just need to hook it in to the Activities API. So we're checking if the user is the rightful owner of this machine. Then we're seeing whether they've got an inventory. And if they have got an inventory, then we send some automatons to them. And then we reset our stock. So before we reset our stock here, I am going to send an XP event, which gives us the opportunity to call this event here. So to send an XP event, I need to get hold of the user. So fortunately, because this is occurring on an onInteract event, it's automatically being passed in the player. So that's the character that's running around the game. So using the player, I can get hold of the user that is in control of that player by doing get user. So player : get user, open bracket, close bracket. Now I have the user. I can run the function send XP event. And when I type send XP, it comes up helpfully with these two tips that say there's two ways you can call that function. You can either just send it the name of the event and you're done, or you can send it the name of your event and some other data about the event. We don't know what that data might be, but you can send it and then you can use it in the condition within the activity over here. So to start with, we'll just do the simple version, which is send through the event. Send XP event. And the event name needs to be in quote marks unless it's a string variable already. And the event name is this one here. So I'm going to copy that and paste it. End quote, end bracket. There we go. So to test this, if I now press F5 to run the preview version of the game, it's just building it behind the scenes. There we go. It's a lot of Tycoon game. So to test it, the first thing I do is open up my console by pressing O on the keyboard, then press Alt to give myself a mouse cursor and select the Activities tab. You can see that it's registered that there is one activity and it's given us the information about it. If I press Alt, it will mean I can go back into the game, but keeping the console tab up. So walk into the factory. Let's go and collect some automatons. I'm going to interact here to collect. And notice that it now has this one added to the end of it. So this event has been called once. And that's essentially it. Now I've hooked up that activity and I can see that it's working because it's got the number 1 at the end of it. Now, fortunately, my automaton, I've generated another one. So let's grab another automaton. And now we can see that the counter increased to 2 before it disappeared. So I can see that it's working. I've collected 2 automatons, or I've run that event twice. Now, one thing that didn't quite work out correctly was that when I collected the automaton, I actually collected around 10, but the event was only called once. So we need to fix that. Let's go back into our code and we can actually call that send XP event multiple times. So we want to call it as many times as we have stock within that machine. So I had 10 automatons, for example. The stock is a variable, and you can see that it's a variable and it's reset here. So I need to call this function that many times before I reset it to 0. So the way we do that is using a for loop. For, not in capitals, for index equals 1. So it will start from 1 and it will go up to however many items we have in stock. Call that function, end. So for 1 to however many things we have in stock, call the XP event. Let's see that in action. So I'm going to press F5 and it's just building. Let's run over here over to our machine. So there's 7 things. So I interact and lo and behold, it's now been called 7 times. So that's a little bit more accurate. And that's essentially how to build in the activities within your game. Now, if you wanted to get a little bit more sort of reusable with our events, we can use some of the condition that is available to us in the activity API. So let's look at how we might do that. Let's go over to here. Yeah, so in our game, we have our activities. We've got our collect automaton activity. Now, what if there were multiple different resources? Lots of different resources. There's automatons, there's nuts and bolts, there's sheets of metal, you name it. There's all sorts of things being made at this factory. We would then have to make an event for each one of those things that we wanted to collect, which is totally cool. But we would also have to script each one individually, which is getting a little bit less cool because that could take a long time and it's more error prone. So maybe instead of collect automaton as our event, it's collect resource. And we can call collect resource from here for whatever this thing is making. So collect resource. So now, regardless of whether it's making automatons or sheet metal or nuts and bolts, it's going to call the same XP event. But maybe we need to then separate the different events. So if we've got a collect automaton event, and maybe we had a collect nuts and bolts event and a collect sheet metal event, and they all listen out for this collect resource, we can pass in the name of the thing we're collecting and then use the condition over here to distinguish which activity responds to which event call. So let's do that. So we're going to use the second property here. We're going to get hold of, we're going to add a table, which is essentially a way of passing in some data without building lots of data structures. It's just a small data structure. And I'm going to pass in a name, which is equal to self.properties. I want the template. So the stock template is just called stock template. And I want its name. So colon get name, open close brackets, because it's a function. There we go. So, and now I'm just collecting, I'm sending the collect resource event, but I'm also passing some data. I'm passing the name of the resource that we are collecting. So let's use the condition over here, add a condition and select the type of thing I'm going to interrogate here. So am I checking for a number? Am I checking for text, or am I checking for a Boolean? I'm going to be checking for text, and I'm going to be checking that name. So I'm going to type name, enter, is equal to automaton with a capital A. That's the name of the template. If I go to my templates, you can see that the template is called automaton. And so this data structure, this line of code here grabs hold of the name of that template. In this situation, it's automaton, could be sheet metal, could be nuts and bolts, was the other one I said. And it puts it in a data structure with name as its key. And that sends it to this API. The API then checks, was the name of this thing automaton? And if it was, then it runs the collect automaton event, even though the event is called collect resource. It will run the collect automaton activity. Let's see whether that works. I just pressed F5. It's rebuilding in the background. And keep our console open. Let's go in our factory. Let's go and get some automatons. There we go. So I've collected 10 automatons, and that still works even though I'm sending that different event, collect resource, and then checking the name of the template is equal to automaton for that particular activity. Now, if you're not completely sure how to write that code or what went on, you're in luck, because that exact code is within the starter template for the Tycoon game. So if you want to, you can go and build your own Tycoon game using that as your starting point, and it will already have that event inbuilt, along with an event for an activity for selling things and an activity for buying a new machine. So they're already inbuilt in the starter template for Tycoon. Other starter templates also have the activities inbuilt, and so they're a really good way of encouraging players to play your game, encouraging and rewarding them for doing so, and rewarding them for coming back, giving them sweet XP points which they can then use to unlock things in the game, and it's a great little system that encourages lots of different types of games and players. And I really look forward to seeing how you use it in your games in Crayta.